Look at the tiny white crystals sitting in your kitchen cabinet. It is hard to believe that this innocent-looking pantry staple has started wars, built entire empires, and ruined millions of human lives. For the vast majority of human history, sweet foods were practically non-existent. There were no baked goods or hard candies. Early humans experienced sweetness almost exclusively by foraging for seasonal fruits or stumbling upon wild beehives. Because sweetness in nature signaled a dense source of survival energy, our biology adapted to crave it. When early humans tasted honey, their brains rewarded them with dopamine spikes, encouraging them to seek it out again and again. We did not invent our modern obsession with sugar. We fell into an evolutionary trap. We are hardwired to relentlessly pursue a sensation that for thousands of years was incredibly difficult to find. That absolute scarcity finally cracked in the dense tropical rainforests of New Guinea. Villagers there discovered wild sugarcane, and they began chewing its thick, fibrous stalks to extract the raw, sweet juice inside. But the true technological breakthrough happened thousands of miles away, in ancient India. Farmers there discovered that if they boiled sugarcane juice over a fire for long enough, it would form a solid, crystallized block. They called it sharkara. Crystallization finally solved the plant's biggest flaw. It turned a liquid juice that would rot in a few days into a stable, dry commodity. For the first time, sweetness could be packed into bags, loaded onto carts, and shipped across continents. A hardwired human craving had finally met a product that could travel. For the first time, a local plant was a tradable commodity, ready to move beyond the borders of India. Soon, Arab merchants were loading heavy bags of these sugar crystals onto camels, carrying them across harsh, arid desert trade routes to introduce the sweetener to the Middle East. Because the journey was so long and the supply so limited, the price was staggering. Apothecaries prescribed tiny pinches of sugar as rare medicine, and European nobles kept it locked away in literal castle vaults. Medieval Europe quickly developed a total obsession with what they started calling white gold. But they faced a permanent geographical barrier. Europe's climate was far too cold to grow sugarcane. To feed an obsession they could no longer afford to import, European empires realized they needed to control the supply themselves. They needed tropical land, and they were willing to cross oceans to claim it. Looking at this antique map of Atlantic trade routes, you can see exactly where that search led them. European explorers carried sugarcane to the Caribbean, where the tropical climate proved to be the perfect environment for massive, sprawling plantations. The dotted lines crossing the Atlantic here show a global triangle of trade snapping into place. Ships left Europe, headed for Africa, and then crossed to the Americas, driven almost entirely by an insatiable, continent-wide demand for sugar. But growing this crop was brutal. Workers had to chop down the thick, towering cane stalks entirely by hand, swinging machetes all day under a blustering tropical sun. To maximize their profits and maintain a massive labor force, European powers orchestrated the transatlantic slave trade. They forced millions of enslaved Africans into horrific, backbreaking labor solely to mass-produce this luxury crop. The sudden global abundance of cheap sweetness was paid for in human blood. A biological instinct for survival had been twisted into a vast, heavily organized machine of human suffering. By the 19th century, manual boiling houses were replaced by heavy iron machinery. The Industrial Revolution brought steam power and towering smokestacks to the sugar mills. Mechanization stripped away the final physical limits on production. Factories churned out thousands of tons of refined white crystals, flooding the global markets and driving the price of a pound down to mere pennies. The transition was complete. A substance that was once a restricted, highly guarded luxury for kings was now an everyday commodity, sitting in the cupboards of almost every human being on Earth. Today, sugar has conquered the global food supply. Walk down a brightly lit supermarket aisle, and you will see it pumped into thousands of products, from massive walls of soft drinks to bread and breakfast cereals. We are caught in a biological irony. The evolutionary mechanism that once saved our ancestors from starvation is now being triggered around the clock in a world of endless supply. We no longer pay for sugar with royal treasuries or plantation slavery, but the cost remains. Today, we are paying with rising global epidemics of obesity, diabetes, and chronic disease. So, the next time you scoop those tiny white crystals into your morning coffee, remember what you are actually holding. It is a legacy of human innovation, unimaginable wealth, and deep suffering. The long pursuit of sugar built our global economy, but it also left a permanent mark on our biology and the trajectory of our species.